Former lawyer turned author Meg Waite Clayton's national bestseller, The Wednesday Sisters, was a word-of-mouth sensation and a book club favorite. Her recently released book, The Four Ms. Bradwells, is a page-turning novel that explores the secrets we keep, even from those closest to us. The Chicago Tribune said about the book, this quartet of smart, witty women meet in law school, but they get their real education many years later, when one of them is nominated to the Supreme Court and an old scandal flares up. Meg hosts the blog First Books, Stories of How Writers Get Started, which features award-winning and best-selling authors sharing stories about their paths to publishing. Caroline Leavitt, is the author of 9 novels, an award-winning writing instructor at the UCLA Writers Program online, and a book critic for the Boston Globe and People magazine. Her newest novel, Pictures of You, is a New York Times bestseller. Newsweek magazine called it an undiscovered jewel, and the Boston Globe described Pictures of You as part literary mystery, part domestic drama, and part psychological examination, and indeed it was. The book generated an interesting conversation in my own book club about loss, forgiveness, and starting over. Meg and Caroline met via an online site called Readerville a decade ago. Since then, they've helped one another on their writing journeys, but they never met in person until this weekend. Today, they'll each read a bit from their newest books, then share together how personal issues they grapple with, experiences they've had, and places that they've lived, including Maryland for Meg, find their way into their novels. We'll have questions from all of you after that. I give you Meg and Caroline.
Bear with us for just a minute. We're putting up a second microphone so we can each have our own microphone.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm thrilled to be meeting Meg for the first time. She's a brilliant author and a brilliant friend. We're going to talk a little bit about the story behind the story. So my novel, Pictures of You, is about a car crash, and it's about the implication of that car crash on the lives of some very different people. There's Isabel, who causes the crash, which kills a woman. She's a photographer fleeing her philandering husband, who's gotten his girlfriend pregnant. There's April, a young wife and mother who has a terrible secret. There's Sam, a young boy with asthma who has a secret of his own. And there's Charlie, a husband and father who spends most of the book trying to figure out what his wife and son were doing in a car with a suitcase 3 hours away from home. I was really interested in how well we really think we know the people we love and what secrets they keep. And I was also interested in how we forgive the unforgivable. So many people have asked me, like, why a car crash? Every single one of my novels happens to have somebody who's wildly in love with their cars. They first hint at trouble, they get in their cars, they drive for miles. My dirty little secret is that I don't drive at all. In fact, I'm totally phobic about cars. I'm not sure where this started, but ever since I've been a little kid, I've thought, if I get in a car, I'm going to kill somebody. So like all 16-year-olds, I figured, well, I'll learn how to drive, and that'll put me at ease, right? So I went to get my driver's license. All I had to do to get it was drive around the block. They gave me the license, but of course I still couldn't drive. So I took these refresher courses. After the 3rd refresher course, the instructor pulled me over to the side of the road, looked at me and said, you know, Caroline, some people just aren't meant to drive. And he said, I think you're one of them. You're the worst driver I've ever had in my car. So I thought about that, and I thought, well, maybe I can write about this, and I'll be able to get to the root of this issue and solve it. So I went home, and I started thinking about car crashes, and all these images started coming up of this woman driving a car, and there's a child involved, and someone's killed. And while I was doing this, something else really strange started to happen. This boy appeared on the page, 9 years old, and he had asthma. Now, my other little dirty secret that I never talked about was that as a child, I was really seriously ill with asthma. I was in and out of emergency rooms, in and out of hospitals. I grew up in a little working class town, so I was pretty much bullied every day. And I got used to keeping my asthma a secret because I didn't want people to make fun of me. If they came up and saw me wheezing, I would say, I beg your pardon, I don't have asthma, this is pleurisy, or this is consumption, or something that they didn't know just to shut them up. In fact, when I was 17 and I had my first boyfriend, and he said, tell me everything. I couldn't tell him about the asthma, so I wrote it in a letter, and I said, you can read it, but you have to burn it after you read it. So here's this kid, and he's appearing on the page, and he has asthma, and I thought, I don't want to write about that. So I deleted all the pages, and he kept coming back and coming back. Now, I know, and I know anybody who's a writer knows that sometimes the stuff that you want to write about isn't really the stuff that you should be writing about. So I thought, okay, I'll give this a shot. So I gave young Sam my childhood. Like me, he deliberately hid all his inhalers. Like me, he was mocked and bullied. Like me, he was in all the emergency rooms and everything else. And something very strange started to happen. The sicker I made this kid, the better I started to feel. Sam was in an emergency room in an oxygen tent dying, and I noticed that I wasn't using any of my asthma medication at all. In fact, I felt so good I didn't even realize that I had it anymore. So the sicker I kept making him, the better I started to feel, and I began to think, you know what? I bet I cured myself. So of course I went to see my pulmonologist, and he looked at me and shook his head and said, Caroline, it doesn't work like that. Asthma is a disease that it plays hide and seek. Some days you have it, other days it goes away, but don't fool yourself. So I didn't believe him. I went back home. The 4 years it took me to write Pictures of You, it was like I didn't have asthma. I was in perfect shape. Right up until the day I handed the manuscript in to Algonquin, and then I got sick. So I didn't cure my driving phobia by writing this book. I didn't cure my asthma by writing this book. But what I did do, in writing about this little boy and giving him all this compassion for what he was going through, I healed my own sense of shame about having asthma, which is, I never would have been able to stand up in front of people and talk about it before, but now I am, so that's a good thing. I know one of the other things that Meg and I wanted to talk about had to do with sense of place. In Pictures of You, I needed Isabel, the main character, to be running away from her life. And I wanted that to include a place that she hated, that she felt was totally claustrophobic. And it also had to be very, very foggy. So I'm probably the only person in the history of the world who feels this, but the place that I hate the most is actually Cape Cod. And the reason why I hate Cape Cod is, well, first of all, like you can see from my complexion that I don't tan, I always burn. I love pools, but I don't like the ocean because I always feel like there's sharks in there and there's Humboldt squid and you can drown in the water. So there was that. But also when I was growing up, my parents used to make my sister and I come to the Cape with them every week, every summer for 2 weeks, and my parents fought constantly. So I thought, you know what, the Cape is like a perfect place for this book to be set. I'm going to read a little bit from the book. All you have to know about the book is this is the very beginning, before the dramatic car crash. Isabel is running away from home, running away from her husband. She's just discovered he's made his girlfriend pregnant, and the fog is starting to come in on the Cape. Okay, done. I have to find the page first. Okay, Isabel drives. It's now mid-afternoon and she's getting hungry. Her cell phone rings, but she doesn't pick it up, half afraid it's her husband's girlfriend again. I don't even know her name, Isabel thinks. By now Luke is home and has found her letter. Maybe he's upset. Maybe he's grabbing his jacket and his keys and he's gone off looking for her, desperate to find her. Maybe he's furious, smashing dishes on the kitchen floor like the time he did when she first told him she hated Cape Cod. She couldn't stand living here. She felt she was suffocating. In all the years they've been together, he's never heard her, never raised a hand or even his voice, but he smashed 5 sets of dishes. Maybe he isn't mad. Maybe he's just relieved. But really, who is she kidding? Of course he isn't home. Of course he hasn't read her pathetic letter. Dear Luke, I want a divorce. Find a lawyer instead of me, Isabel. Of course he's with this new woman, with this new baby. The fog is heavier now. The visibility is terrible. Damn, she knows she's lost now. It was a mistake to take a side route, but she can always turn around and get back on the highway. Maybe she can even stop at a diner, treat herself to a late breakfast. All the things that are bad for her, all the things she loves, eggs, bacon, sausage. The darkness gets to her. It doesn't feel natural this time of day. And even though she knows it's just fog, it feels spooky. She flicks the parking lights on and off to try to slice through the darkness. And then the fog moves again, and she sees, almost like pieces of a torn photo, patches of what's there. There's a car. There's something red. There's a glint of chrome. There's a car stopped in the center of the road, turned the wrong way. Its light's completely dark. She jolts. She knows the stopped car isn't moving, but it still seems to be speeding up towards her, growing larger and larger, even as she tries to pull away from it. The road's too narrow, ringed with tall, thick trees. Her eyes dart in the road, but there's nowhere to go. There's no space to turn around. There's not enough length to stop in time, no matter how she's pumping the brakes. Oh, Jesus. Isabel veers, trying not to hit the trees. The car slows, lurching her forward. Time turns elastic, stretching out, slowing. Then, shocked, she sees a woman with short, spiky blonde hair, a red, dressy dress frilling around her knees, coming into sharp focus, rising up like one of Isabel's negatives in the milky developing fluid. The woman is just standing there in front of the car. She's not moving. She's staring as if she knew this was going to happen and she was somehow waiting for it. And Isabel swerves again, harder this time, the tires screeching, her heart clamped. "Get out of the road," Isabel screams. Frantic, she grips the wheel. "What are you doing?" She's shrieking now, but the woman seems pinned in place. In the distance, she can hear a voice, like a splash of pennies, and then she sees a child, a boy with dark flying hair, and when he sees her, for a moment he freezes too. His eyes lock onto hers, and for one terrifying moment, Isabel feels hypnotized. For 1 second, she can't move either. Then she smashes on the horn, and he startles and bolts across the road, disappearing into the woods, and her car's going too fast, and she can't stop it. She can't control it. Her heart tumbles against her ribs. Her breath goes ragged. She's losing control, and despite herself, she's praying, "God, please, Jesus." Then she hears the hornet again, which flies past her out of the car into the night. And then the woman finally moves, pressing herself back closer to the sedan. And it's too late. And the two cars slam together like a kiss. Thank you.
I'm going to say, when they asked me if I would like to do this alone or with somebody, I said, "Oh, I want to do it with Caroline Leavitt." What a mistake. Now I have to follow Caroline Leavitt. I will tell you that I read pictures of you in manuscript. Caroline was nice enough to send it to me, and it's really a compelling novel, so definitely look for it when you're done. I'm Meg Waite Clayton, and I am the author of 3 novels, The Wednesday Sisters, which many of you may know of. The form is Bradwells, which is just out, and The Language of Light, which many of you here may know of because it did well in Maryland. It sold very modestly, never made it to paperback with St. Martin's, my original publisher, but I'm really happy to report that Random House is bringing it out as a Reader's Circle book in June. So that first one is set in the Maryland horse country, just north of Baltimore, where I lived for a number of years with my children, and where I started writing seriously. I had just left the practice of law, and the reason, short anecdote, since I think we said we would talk about how we started writing. The reason I left the practice of law, although I really enjoyed it when I was doing it, was that I had children at the time. I had a son, and I was pregnant with another child, and I was working all the time, 100-hour weeks. I was doing M&A work. And I came home late one night, 2 in the morning, although I think when this story started, it was probably 11 at night, but it's gotten to be 2 in the morning. And we ended up in this conversation over a glass of wine about whether this was what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I got the idea that, oh yeah, what he's saying is, do I want it to say she wrote a great indenture on her tombstone? Which was not what I wanted my tombstone to say, although I think it's a fine tombstone for any of the lawyers in the crowd here. But so I told him, something I hadn't told anybody since I had confessed it to my first boyfriend when I was 14 years old, which was that I would like to be a writer. My dad is an accountant, and my mom is a homemaker. And there were no artists in my life. There were no writers in my life. Those were things that, writers were people who could leap tall literary buildings in single bounds. And I was sure that was not something I could do. So when I confessed to Mac, I said, well, if I could do anything, I'd be a novelist, but haha, that's going to happen. And he, without missing a beat, even though I had had a glass of wine by then, and it was probably 3 a.m. by this point in the conversation, said, well, how are you going to know whether you can do it or not if you don't give it a try? And I didn't leap directly from the practice of law, but it got me thinking. And it wasn't too long before I left the practice of law and started writing. I will tell you that the money is not as good. My advance for my first novel, which I will tell you took me a long time to write, was the exact dollar amount as my bonus as a first-year lawyer. I'm happy to say that my second novel, The Wednesday Sisters, paid substantially better, and the four Miss Bradwells, I'm actually making something close to a living as a writer. But so that's how I started writing, and I'm going to ask this question. I really always hate to ask it because there's always the possibility that nobody will have, but I know there are at least a couple of people here who have read The Wednesday Sisters. So have any of you read The Wednesday Sisters? Ah, my sisters. Good. So that is really my story of how I wrote. Oh, Caroline's sitting. Wait a minute. Let the record reflect that I stood the whole time she was reading. Anyway, so that is really how I started writing. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and like Frankie in that novel, I literally, if Nick fell asleep in the car on the way home from dropping Chris off at preschool, I would pull over to the side of the road, whip out my manuscript, and write at the steering wheel until Nicky woke up again, and then I would continue on home. So a lot of any of you guys ever been to Chuck E. Cheese? I can do 6 hours at Chuck E. Cheese, writing while my children are running around. They're older now. I'll tell you, my oldest is at University of Chicago and my youngest is at University of Michigan. So all of a sudden I have all the writing time in the world. But when they reached school age, I started a discipline for myself, which was 2,000 words or 2 o'clock. And I sat down and started writing right when they left for school, or when I dropped them off in the days when they were dropped off. And then I didn't stop until it was time for them to come home. And the exception was if I already had 2,000 words, I could eat bonbons or watch Oprah or anything I wanted. 9:30, I'm done. I can do anything I want all day. But the fact of the matter is that if I have 2,000 words by 9:30, I am never, ever getting up from that chair, because that is really when that good sunshine is shining on your writing life. So I'm going to read for just a minute from the four Miss Bradwells. The basic premise for this one, for the ones of you who have already read The Wednesday Sisters, it is, again, a friendship story. This one is a bit more of a mystery. There is a dead body that shows up by the end of chapter 1, for anybody who likes that. It is also very much, The Wednesday Sisters was very much a story of women my mother's generation, really, women who came of age in the 1960s or 1950s even, and had children and families before the women's movement happened. It's a women helping each other story, and this is also women helping each other story. It is, like The Wednesday Sisters, also a little bit of an exploration of the barriers that women in particular face to reaching for their dreams. But I hope that, like at the end of The Wednesday Sisters, I hope that readers feel inspired to reach for their dreams. It's narrated from 4 points of view, but I'm just going to read a short passage from the first one, which is the beginning, and then a little of the middle of the chapter. And then we're going to take questions. Betsy is sitting alone at a table with it's Mia, room 216, the Hart Building, Washington, D.C., Friday, October 8th. Betsy is sitting alone at a table with 2 untouched water cups, the pen I gave her the day we graduated from law school, a clean legal pad, and a microphone. On the dais, one of 19 senators talks his way toward a question he hasn't quite arrived at yet. Cameras whir mercilessly as photographers on the floor between them vie for the better angle, capturing the small fatty deposit on Betsy's freckled face, her perky mouth and shattered crystal eyes. And I just want to pause for a minute here and say, this neck, when I got it from my publisher, my response was, gosh, it's a lovely neck. What's a really perfect 18-year-old debutante neck in white pearls doing on my book about 50-something-year-old women who not only don't have the neck, they don't remember when they did, and wear gray pearls. And my publisher's response was, the gray pearls don't pop. And when she said, and when I said about the neck, I said, so what about the neck? And she said, women, she's a woman of a certain age as well. And she said, well, we don't have the neck anymore, but we can relate to the neck. Every woman can relate to that neck. So I thought, you can relate to that neck? But I thought, okay, well, I'll try that on my friends. So I sent the cover to the woman who was my best friend in the 6th grade and through high school and said, Cheryl, look, my new cover, what do you think? Remember when we had necks like that? And she emailed back, Meg, we never had necks like that. That, she said, is a fictional neck. Okay, so sorry. So, well, I'm going to skip to the next part of this, but just imagine, so Betts is sitting in the chair being grilled by the Senate. She's a nominee for the Supreme Court. And I will tell you that when I started writing this book, she was a nominee for the district court. And the reason she was a nominee for the district court is because when I pitched it to Random House, to Ballantine as a Supreme Court nominee, they really loved the concept, but they said, well, it was before Sotomayor was nominated, before Elena Kagan had been nominated. So we had Sandra Day O'Connor, then we had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Sandra Day O'Connor had retired, and we had Ruth Bader Ginsburg for 93, about 15 years. Oh, it's only one woman on the court again. So she said, I don't know, an immigrant woman Supreme Court nominee in our lifetime, maybe not realistic. So then when Justice Sotomayor was in her confirmation hearings, I finally picked up the phone and said to my editor, so, Sonia Sotomayor. And my editor said, you're right, make her a Supreme Court nominee. So then I'm just going to read a little bit, just a short passage that's a little later on in the first chapter, and it gives you a little bit of the spirit of the friendship. Betts, who is the Supreme Court nominee, is sitting there being grilled by the senators, and her 3 friends are sitting in the seats watching her and kind of silently cheering her on. So they're in law school, they used to toss notes back and forth while they were not in class. I would like to say only when they were studying in the reading room. And so one of them has brought one of those old fake class notes that they had, and it's written on a gum wrapper, but it's meant to mimic those class notes like you read in your alumni magazine. So and so was just nominated for the Supreme Court or whatever. So they're talking about that, and Mia, who's narrating it, says she's talking about Lainey, their other friend, and then she says, "I suppose she's imagining, as I am, what a real Law Quadrangle magazine alumni update might look like after the full Senate vote." Elżbieta Betts-Zuchowski, JD 82, has been appointed to the United States Supreme Court following in the steps of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for whom Ms. Zuchowski clerked on the D.C. Circuit. One of us would write the note for her. We've written every one of each other's alumni notes ever since Isabel was born and Zach died in the same few short weeks, and Betts, who'd somehow managed through it all, broke down over the writing of this irrelevant announcement. How do I do this, she wanted us to tell her. How do I announce in 50 words or less that my daughter is born and my husband is dead? The bones of her wrists were as fragile as Zach's had been, as if she'd gone through chemotherapy with him, an aggressive form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, dead at 29. It had been, surprisingly, Ginger who had put her arm around Betts' shoulder and said, so soothingly, she might have been reading one of her favorite poems, "Let me, Betts, let me do this for you, this one small thing." It's something we've done for each other ever since, too, set the words to announce each other's joys and sorrows to the world. Or joys, really, only joys, not sorrows. Betts would never have thought to submit a class note about Zach's death if it hadn't so closely coincided with Izzy's birth. We don't ever announce bad news in the alumni magazine. Ginger didn't submit anything the fall she was passed over for her partner, any more than I did when I divorced. And I sure don't plan to submit a class note announcing I've been fired. If I find a new job, when I find a new job, Lainey or Betts or Ginger will compose a note that makes it appear I've moved up in the world, even if I haven't. That's the way of alumni class notes. So I think I'll leave it there so we have some time to have questions. And somebody has to go first or else I'll start grilling you. Oh, we haven't. Go ahead.
Can you tell me what the effect of e-book publishing has done to your ability to get published, or the ability of new novels to get published?
I must say that's a really long and not particularly interesting conversation. I don't think it matters for getting published. The publishers buy the ebook rights, and you do whatever they tell you to do.
I do what, is this working?
Share
No, it's
this
not.
one.
Okay. I do think that with the ebooks, you do get a lot more readers because it's cheaper for people they're more willing to take a chance. And also I've been noticing that ebooks seem to be cooler among my son is 14 and his generation. They like their Kindles and they like their devices. So anything that gets people reading more, to me, is just, you want that. You can ask us anything personal.
Do we base our characters on ourselves? Do we?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did the collaboration work between the two of you? Like, how many pages did you submit at one time, or did you sync up a date and then?
We actually don't share a book. We don't write together. We write separately, and we're just friends, and we're just reading together because both of us are too cowardly to get up here by ourselves.
So even when you were working in process, you didn't like workshop each other's work or help out?
No.
No. We've had conversations about writing, but nothing specific.
I do work with a writing group. The Wednesday Sisters is a book about a writing group, and it's a very much an homage to my mom and her generation, but it's also very much an homage to my writing group. We are a group of 4 who started out with one little travel article published among us, and we now count 8 books published or written under contract. Everybody has agents. Everybody has, poems and stories and all that kind of thing. And I like to say there was nothing it was Davis King Bookseller, so maybe there was something in the water that they made the coffee out of. But really it was just the friendship that kept us going through those hard times. And there are hard times, I think, for every writer.
I also want to say that one of the people that I do work with that does read my writing is sitting right there, the writer Catherine Weber. And I think it's really important for every writer to have someone who can bounce ideas off and read your pages and be critical and yet smart. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Each of you say something about the most recent book, the book you set out to write, the book you thought you were going to write.
Oh.
And the book that you've just read from, and where you got to, where you thought you began, and where you ended up, and what you learned along the way that made it work.
Now you go first?
Wow.
I can answer that.
You answer that first.
Mine, because I sold it on a proposal, I had to keep looking back at the proposal to make sure that I was in the ballpark of what I was supposed to write. And so in many ways it does look like it was supposed to, except with that one change in the level of the court nominee. But one of the things that really, really surprised me is I thought I was writing this book about these professional women who have or have not made their ways in the world, whether they've gone on the mommy track, as we call it, or hate to call it, or whatever, all that kind of thing. And what it turns out to be, shockingly, is very much an homage to motherhood. And I would not in a million years have guessed that it would be so much about how important our mothers are to us and how important it is how we raise our children as well.
I think for me it had to do with the ending. I got about 3/4 of the way through my book, and then I realized I had no idea what to do with it or how it was going to end, and it just sort of revealed itself to me. And when it revealed itself to me, it became a sort of a different book. And I can't really talk about it because if I do, then it gives away the ending, and if you haven't read it, then you won't want to read it. But that's part of the whole process. You never really know. And sometimes I feel like you're writing a book to discover what that book is really about.
Wait a minute, I think this woman needs a microphone. No, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just teasing.
I think I don't write. I wish I could write. I wanted to write. So I think
Thank you so much. I'm going to say that this is Carol, and Carol sent her daughter my book, and her daughter read it, and that's, I think, the reason that I was invited here, because they were both big fans of the book. And Carol came all the way from Florida for this, and when I heard somebody was coming all the way from Florida for this, I thought, wow. So big applause to you. And thank you. I told Carol, and so don't tell her this. Carol, cover your ears. I told her her book club is reading the Wednesday Sisters, and I said I would Skype them. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just going to tell you, if any of you have book clubs and you want to Skype or phone chat or anything, I'm happy to do it. You do a second round.
I guess, is that it?
Or the new book. The new book. The new book. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we have more? Oh, sorry.
Are we out of time?
Are we out of time? I don't know. Are we out of
Somebody
time?
will call time when we're out of time. So yeah.
Okay.
Question is where you're from?
Where am I from?
Yeah.
I'm from the Cape Cod area. I'm from Waltham, Mass. I prefer not to think about it. I prefer to think of myself as a New Yorker.
I was born in Washington, D.C., but I have lived all over the country, in the Midwest, in Kansas and Chicago. I went to school at Michigan, University of Michigan. And then I came here and lived, go Blue. My son's there now. And then I lived north of Baltimore in the hunt country there, the horse country there, for a few years when my children were young, and that's where I first started writing. And so that's where the horse farm that the Language of Light is set on looks shockingly like my farm in Baltimore, except that it has a much prettier house. Anyone else?
I read in the Washington Post last week about a review of the book about Eudora Welty and her Maxwell, her editor, in New York, and she talks about kind of in the letters about the debilitation that sets in when you lose confidence in what you've written. When each sentence you lost confidence. Have you experienced that? What happened?
All the time. All the time. Pictures of You was probably 25 drafts. And the way it works is I did about 10 drafts myself. Then I showed it to people and they said, no, you have to rewrite this, you have to rewrite this. Then I gave it to my agent who said, I love it. Now we have to rewrite it. So I rewrote it 3 times for her. She sold it to Algonquin in a week, and my Algonquin editor said, love it. Now we have to rewrite it. And that was another thing. So you're constantly living with that kind of desperation and fear, but you learn to love it, and you learn to realize that you're going to push through it and produce something really great, hopefully.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I live in constant, much like the Wednesday Sisters, I have very little confidence in what I'm writing as I write it, and I read that piece as well. And what I think when I read those pieces is, gosh, I'm in such good company. It makes me feel so much better. And that's honestly part of the reason that I host the blog that I host, which Caroline has posted on, and Eleanor Brown, who was here earlier, I don't know if she's still here or not, has posted on some really, oh, there you are. Some really amazingly inspiring stories about how people got started writing and how hard it can be. Julia Glass posted for me recently, and I thought, oh, this is going to be, she's won the National Book Award for her first novel. If you don't know her, it's called 3 Junes. I thought, oh, this is going to be the one overnight success story, because that's what everybody thinks, it's an overnight success. She sent me a post about the 6 years that she spent writing short stories, sending them out, and getting a little bit of what we call ink on the page from The New Yorker, and that was it. No acceptances, no stories sold, no great publications, nothing. And she says, to this day, The New Yorker has never bought one of her short stories.
That's amazing.
I know, isn't it? Yeah. You do have to, get up the guts to believe in yourself and just keep going through it, because it's hard to get published. It is really, somebody asked that question. Ebooks doesn't make it easier to get published, at least with a major publisher. It gets easier to publish it yourself, but you can self-publish, exactly. But no matter what you do to get through a novel and, keep going, you just have to keep going and hope that there's going to be something at the end of the line. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. I think a novel's easy compared to a collection of short stories myself. For me, a novel is like sitting down every day. You know, I write friendship stories, so I get to sit down every day and wrap myself up in the spirit of my closest friends, many of whom live far away from me now. And so every day when I sit down, I'm like just visiting old friends. And when I write short stories, for me, it's like going to a cocktail party. And every time I go, I have to meet new people. And I'm fundamentally shy and very nervous meeting new people. So I don't like that as much as I like being with old friends.
Yeah, I always say that writing short stories is like dating, and writing a novel is like a long and satisfying marriage where you're the same people and you don't have to worry so much, and it's just much nicer.
God, I'm feeling like a party girl now. Anyone else? All right, well, we'll be just delighted to sign books. We'll be over, I think, someplace by the bookselling place. And please enjoy the day. It's beautiful weather. Thank you so much for arranging that for us.